Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Crown and today we are going to have some more stories that I hope that you will enjoy. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now, without further ado, let's go! So this happened yesterday. Been doing a neat event. Local cemetery is a family plot. My mom and brother-in-law are both buried there. You can drive into the gravesites area as long as you stick to the tarmac. I drove in with my sis. I'm 45 and she's 47. We drove there to lay a wreath for both of them. The tarmac, however, runs short and my bad leg was playing up, so my sis said to wait in the car, and she quickly went and laid the wreath, but she came back crying. Turns out some jerk around 30 was sitting on mom's headstone listening to music on his phone, and when she saw him, she had a complete freak out. The guy had told her to get lost and she was distraught. I told her to stay in the car, limp over there and find a guy trying to pull the message on the wreath off it. I go crazy, snatch the wreath back and tell him to get the heck away from my family's grave.
Oh yeah? So your witch wife sent her crippled husband to scare me?
Apparently the family resemblance escaped him. At this point I was close to losing it, but was saved by my sis coming back with a council worker who was maintaining the site, and he told the guy to leave or cops will be called. Full-on agreement kicks off. I break down in tears. My sister is crying but is also taken in the Karen mode she slips into when she's stressful. Full-on argument kicks off. I break down in tears. My sister is crying but is also taken in the Karen mode she slips into when she's stressful. The guy eventually decides to go cause my sister called the cops. Turns out he's been caught before and is known to the council and the cops. He steals the flowers etc. that people put on graves and goes to sell them. I'm still upset now, not sure whether I'm more angry or just sad. Who does this? Told the cops when they catch him I will press charges. Edit. The police caught this megger who was stealing grave flowers in a different cemetery. He's facing over 20 theft charges, plus he damaged someone's headstone. Simply put, he's depting crap up to his neck sadly, and best he'll get a fine and suspended sentence. Some comments seem to wonder why I didn't beat him. Although very tall, I am medically disabled due to kidney failure. My transplant failed due to what may have been COVID. Symptoms match, but I got sick months before COVID was a thing. Due to complications, I lost parathyroid glands, so I don't absorb calcium without meds. My bones are so weak, it hurts to move. That, and I was raised to not be violent unless in defense of myself. So I heard the story from one of the YouTubers today and it reminded me of an event that happened in 2019 while I was in a liquor store with my German Shepherd. We'll refer to him from here forward as Dog, cause the Disney film Up is so rad. Anyways, Dog is my service animal due to PTSD from past combat-induced PTSD. Dog at this time had been through the state police training out of my pocket, as well as a 6-month training program which literally made Dog into the most obedient working dog you could imagine. Typically, Dog is not on a leash unless we are going into business. All my friends and family know that if I'm there, Dog is there too. Dog will not enter a doorway unless he's right beside / in front / behind me, and is constantly looking at me for cues. So while in the liquor store, I was cruising aisles with Dog on his leash that is 4 feet long and attached to my belt, so I don't have to use a hand to hold him. He doesn't tug anyway. A woman approaches me being super sweet and keeps attempting to pet my dog. After numerous attempts to tell her no nicely, I flat out said, "Listen lady, he's a service animal and he's on the clock. He's not going to pay attention to you and he doesn't want you to touch him, so please get lost." To which she was very offended and huffed as she walked away to the register. I took a few minutes to gather myself as I really don't like confrontation these days. Dog did yip at me a few times, alerting that I was a bit anxiety-riddled, but I sucked it up. Finally, I chose the bourbon I wanted for the evening at mom's and resigned myself to either taking an Uber home or crashing on the couch. Now moving forward, we will see the same Karen reappear as, unbeknownst to me, this is my mom's new neighbor. Now on to the event. I showed up at my mother's partner's house where she had just moved in about 3 months earlier, and Doug had been there a few times before, so she immediately hopped out of the driver window of my RX-7 as I parked and ran up to say hello to my mom, who was sitting on the back porch. The driveway is a shared driveway with another home, with a property line being in the center of it, and it's wide enough for parking into each lot. Doug was never on Karen's property before we get fully started. As I turned off the RX-7, which is a very loud sport car, I could hear Doug yipping in excitement, and I glanced over to see my mom starting to throw a tennis ball. Cool game on Doggo. As I'm casually walking toward mom about to say hello, I feel the claws of a demon dig into my bicep. As mentioned above, I have combat-induced PTSD, which means my immediate reaction was to put the threat in the dirt, or in this case, on the pavement. Karen hit the ground elbow and face first, and ended up with a pretty red black eye, bloody nose and some road rash on her elbow. I immediately tried to apologize, and while I'm attempting this woman screams, just making a noise and kicks in my direction. As she pulls her foot back, Doug appears between my legs, with his head poking out in front of me, and the meanest set of teeth in the zip code. Outside of Karen's, I assume. Karen gets up and spits on me, and calls me a slew of racial slurs. I'm white, by the way, so I guess she just has a small vocabulary. Then exclaims she is calling the police and stating that my dog attacked her. Instead of reining him in, I punched her in the face, claiming that the injury to her elbow would be from my dog, and then her face being rearranged by the concrete would be from my hand. Okay, lady, do what you gotta do. I whistled and threw up a gang sign to Doug, and he immediately ran into mom's house. I sat down on the back porch and smoked a cigarette, shaken from what had just happened, and took my anxiety meds. My mom realizes that I'm bleeding through my t-shirt from that Banshee's grip. Oh great, I'm actually going to need stitches from her talons. We start hearing sirens, and within 5 minutes of everything 6 police cars come flying down the drive, all parking to block it off, and leaving the cherries and berries on. Okay, Karen has clearly made up one heck of a story. I don't move from my seat, nor does my mom. Karen immediately approaches the police and starts screaming about that criminal and his attack dog. And I honestly couldn't help but snicker, as the only thing Doug has ever truly attacked is a large pizza I left on the top of the stove a few months earlier as I checked the mail. After about 15 minutes of Karen jumping up and down, the police asked to see Doug, who's inside the house, but only the screen door is closed, which has no glass or screen at the top but glass at the bottom. I whistle for Doug, and he hops through the opening and comes over to sit at my feet. Officers did step back for a moment, and I assured them he hadn't attacked anyone and they were fine to approach. I gave Doug his command to both stay and that he was off the clock, even though he still had his service vest on. A female officer approached and stuck her hand out, and Doug licked it. I start speaking with the police and giving them my side of the events, explaining my PTSD and showing Doug's identification as I carry it on me everywhere I go. I happen to notice while speaking with them, Doug hasn't moved, but the female officer is now down on her knees, rubbing Doug's belly. That's a good boy, Doggo. I think, as he's always been a bit of a ladies' man. The officers finally turn to my mom, and with a smile she simply says, "Oh, our Ring cameras caught everything. Would you like to see the video?" Karen turned a shade of white I did not think was physically possible, even for the absolutely most entitled white woman. After reviewing the footage, the officers asked me if I'd like to press charges, and I decline. Though I'm happy to make a report, I don't want to cause a feud between my mother's new neighbor and her. The cops understand and agree. Karen immediately asks if she can go at this point, to which the officers say yes. 5 out of 6 officers left, and the female officer stated she was taking her lunch break and wanted to know if she could hang out with Doug, as he reminds her of the dog she had in high school. Of course we obliged, and mom even brought out some lemonade and leftovers for the officer. I know Karen might not have gotten the big girl justice she deserved, but she since apologized for grabbing me and explained she understood why I reacted the way I did. She and Doug are now friends too. Sometimes things work out for the best after all. So I got to see a wild Karen wreaking havoc last month at a famous name department store. Due to deterioration in my knee, I walk with a cane and have a handicap placard in my card. I normally do my shopping around 7 a.m. to avoid the crowds, and I was getting out of the car to go inside when a snotty voice behind me says,
You need to move. You're in my spot.
I turn around and there is a crabby-looking female glaring at me from her car in the lane. I go to ignore her and start towards the door when she yells again,
Get out of my spot. You're just fat, not disabled. I am calling the cops.
She's one of them wenches and I see red. I turned and yelled back at her to go ahead. They will run the placard. It's in my name. They will run the card tags. They are also in my name. Now since it's the holiday season, I cordially invite you to get lost. I leave her screaming at my back and go into the store. The door attendant asks if I require any assistance with her harassment. I tell him no. It's nothing that a can of Raid or a muzzle couldn't cure. Yeah, there wasn't enough caffeine in me for the morning to start off with an entitled, screeching demon to start crap. I'm going to have a little vague on some details to protect myself here, so I can discuss the type of business and so on. This is a lot of background to explain the kind of situation that developed over a decade. A place that was once truly fun to work at and easy to earn a bit of extra overtime became a dog-eat-dog struggle to survive. The low-level peons like me were split between those who felt disenfranchised and hated by the management, those that were basically looking for an escape route, and that group of snakes who could smile to your face and act sympathetic to your situation before sneaking away to inform the managers of anything they had learned which might have value. We were in a specific area of the business that was isolated and slowly being replaced by technology. So from over 1,000 in our building, it dropped to just around 250 when I left. Most of this was done through voluntary redundancy, but the managers were given incentive to fire as many as possible to save money on VR. And since manager jobs were also slowly being cut, they were desperate to fire as many as possible, but most were incapable of following procedure. Mike was that intelligent and brutal kind of manager who, like the others, had been promoted into the position, but knowing he wouldn't get trained officially, took it upon himself to become competent. The man had gotten dozens of people fired directly and more indirectly by helping less competent managers follow the correct procedure. A certain quantity of work at a certain level of quality was required, which everyone met. Yet, they had a bottom and top 10 list, and if you were on the top 10 list, your job was on the line regardless if you met the basic requirements, since there was always a bottom 10 by definition. There were always 10 people on the firing line. This might be vague, but it has to be. Mike's team was a sort of clearinghouse for the bottom 10. We were shifted between shifts and teams for various reasons, but what I quickly learned is that somehow the shift's bottom 10 were all on Mike's team. Now, my performance was constantly in the top 10, so I was safe on that count, but my attendance was low due to my health issues and my attitude was really bad. I also learned that the rest of the team was made up of people who weren't low in performance but had low attendance and attitude problems just like me. And we had all been on a chopping block by managers who failed to follow procedure. In short, Mike was the executioner of the workforce. The most vulnerable to being fired were shifted around to his team so he could succeed where the others had failed. Sooner or later my time came. My health caused a series of absences while I had hospitalizations and Mike bounced into action. In the space of a year, he made 7 attempts to fire me, and each time, I involved HR who stepped in and protected me. I approached HR to make a case that what was happening was wrong, not just to me but to everyone. I made the case that the situation of Mike being the executioner created the hostile work environment, and the fact that I had gotten his attempts to fire me thrown out proved that he was not only hostile but was actively toxic, that it was against the law to discriminate on age/disability, and a myriad of other arguments. I was told that there was nothing they could do. Mike was untouchable and had the full support of the upper management in our building because he was saving a lot of money in voluntary redundancy payouts by firing the vulnerable. Legally, there might be a case, but it would have to go through a court system and not through HR unless I had an example of him being hostile and abusive. The person I spoke to was very sympathetic and he suggested I look into some things related to job opportunities that were coming up. He mentioned that many of them were managerial positions because a new type of roaming manager had been introduced. These were very needed and weren't getting much interest. Think substitute teacher where a manager gets sent to all around in the country at the drop of a hat. It didn't occur to me instantly, but weeks later, as I sat at work listening to Mike talk about his family, it clicked into place and my plan began to take form. Instead of making a complaint, I gave a glowing review and had several others do the same. If we couldn't get the man fired for his actions, we could get him promoted into a job that he couldn't take. The managers in our area were not even being considered for transfers because they lacked the training and qualifications to be managers anywhere else. Our reviews might just push him over the line into getting a promotion. And since roaming managers were being sought, the two should dovetail nicely. We didn't give the reviews to our management but directly higher up the food chain, way above anyone that ever dealt with our area of the business. Each of us mentioned that Mike had done an amazing job at sorting out problems and so on, had great managerial skills and an in-depth knowledge of procedure. Then we sat back and waited. A few months went by with nothing happening, and I thought the attempt had failed, but then we came into Mike losing his mind. He was shouting at the shift manager, his boss, about how he wasn't being given a choice. Turns out the higher management had gotten our reviews, looked into his record and decided he was a perfect fit for the roaming manager position, and since they were in the process of getting rid of managers in our area, they insisted that Mike be pushed into it. Mike had of course tried to refuse a promotion as was his right, but the higher management had made it a choice to accept the promotion or be demoted back to peon. Mike had a family and couldn't just uproot them whenever the company needed him elsewhere, and a demotion was a pay cut back into the workforce of people who despised them and that were slowly being culled was just as bad. So he asked for voluntary redundancy instead, and was accepted. His last day he went berserk shouting and swearing about how badly the company had treated him after all he had done. I was unfortunately absent for it, but got a play-by-play and loved every second of it. Since I was told explicitly that I couldn't get him punished or fired, I got him a promotion he couldn't accept instead. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.